Something like that. I like this. Much quicker though. Great old tunes. Ooh, right. Anyway, I like it a lot. I like it a lot. It doesn't stay in tune. It's partly because it's got some new strings on, but also partly because the nut is pinging. But yeah, we'll come back to it and have a close-up look at it, but I do like it. But here we've got Phil's Roadworn Strat Fender, made in Mexico. And let's have a good look at it, because I have to say straight away, I really like this. I'm not over special fussy about relic'ing, but actually this is done really well. I mean, okay, so that's not convincing, you know, if we're being straight, that's not a real wear pattern or whatever, but it's better than many. And overall, this guitar has some fantastic things going for it. I mean, it's grubby as well as being relic'd, so actually I think that really adds to it. And it's simple, it's pretty straightforward. Single ply pickguard. I think we've got Tex-Mex pickups here. What is a relic'd nitro finish, I believe. And we have got some quite rusty bits and bobs here. And we've got, you know, dull metal, which is great, fine. We've got the back plate is in the case, but you can see the relic on the back of this isn't, you know, it's not real wear, but it's not badly done, and there are quite a few scratches and gouges to kind of keep the eyes and the fingers entertained as you feel your way around it. And then the back has been stripped back to stripped away to wood mostly, and had some oil or wax rubbed in to kind of dirty it up. And then we've got the split post vintage Clouson's dial tuners at the top there. And I guess what we've got is a guitar that just sounds great. I really love, and that's what I love about the Strat, is actually if you get that bit right and you make it playable, you've got a fantastic instrument, because it's all about the pickup sound for me. And of course it looks brilliant too. I mean, okay, so who doesn't like something as kind of incredibly vintage looking as that, because it's old looking. You can't go wrong with that scratch plate, which is kind of yellowing around the edges. It has a real sort of credible look to it. And there are a couple of downsides about this. The first one is the string alignment. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze, I think. The string alignment is a bit close to the treble edge, but we can adjust that with the screws in a little bit. You'll note the frets are black because I'm going to level them. So we got string alignments a bit off. The tremolo doesn't go back to tune very well, so I think it's to do with these screws here, maybe a bit too far in. And we've got some pinging in the nut, which isn't great. But so Phil sort of said, here, see what you think of this, take your time, set it up. And also, of course, the other thing I was going to say, we've got bend chokes on actually the high E and the B string. So there are the three negatives about it. But the three positive, or the several positives are, it feels great, it's a light Strat, it's a credible feeling, and just totally great sounding Strat. So you can't really go wrong. Yes, it's quite a bit of money, but I think, you know, is it 1,300 quid's worth of money for a guitar with sort of vintage styling and attitude? I think it's pretty good. It's more credible and more. I like the feel of this more. Now Phil's kept it, I think, you know, tucked away somewhere for a long time, and it's through play and neglect or whatever, it's built up some fabulous goo and grime, which, you know, my tendency, and also on the finish here, you know, there's quite a lot of, I don't know whether it's original relic'ing or whether it's sort of recent additions of slime and goo or whatever, but, you know, I have to resist all of my temptations to clean this. I might just brush out the cobwebs from under there, but that's pretty much all I want to do to it, except focus on the tuning, the string alignment and the bending. Chokes. Again, this is an original nut on this guitar, and I'm kind of, for once, I'm committed to leaving absolutely everything original. Often I would put a tusk nut on there instead of this Corian or whatever the factory thing is, unless it's too low, for example, and I can't, and it won't keep tuned. But it's pinging a little bit at the moment, so I'm going to adjust that wherever I can with the nut files, and get it to play and stay in tune. That would be my ambition. So I haven't even measured the height, playing action height at the moment, so I had a sit down kind of twang of it, and I really enjoyed it. It made me want to play it, which is always a great sign. I think the action is reasonably high, and the reason it's probably reasonably high, certainly on the treble side, is it's because it's a 7.25 radius, so it's trying to overcome the geometric limitations. And the problem of this is it's choking out already, so it does need some leveling if we're going to get anywhere near a reduction of the action. So we've got 1.75 on the treble side, and that's a little bit higher than it technically needs to be, but we're already getting chokes, so we're going to expect more chokes afterwards, after we reduce it. So yeah, okay, I'll pick you up later. So what I will do is, let's have a little, before I do the leveling, let's take this down to 1.5. Again, even 1.5 is a little bit higher than my typical target action for a Strat, but for a 7.25 that's fine. So we're a little bit low on there, which is okay. That's why the B was bending, choking out more. And we've got 1.5, that's okay. We're a little bit high here. There we go, bring that down. We'll be a little bit high, and I'm doing this by eye now. A little bit high on there, and we're coming down. So if we're 1.5, we'll kind of aim for 1.75 on the bass side to start with. You won't necessarily get 1.5 on the low E on a 7.25 radius. The tightness doesn't permit it. So the aim of this is I've set a nice even action, a little bit higher, as I said, than my normal guitars with not such a tight radius. But we're going to level it out now, and even at this action, even at the previous action we had bends choking out on the B and the high E string. So there's going to be some work required to get this to play, and I'm going to go straight to it. Something, let's see, hex key that's fallen down. I think what I also want to do, I did check the relief before, so let me just double check it. I think what I'll do is I'll get the arm out the way for the time being, and we'll just look at the relief. Now the relief is probably about 0.3, could be a little flatter. Now it's take the neck off. Now people say slack the thing off, push the neck out somewhat, do the thing, push it back in, tighten it up. We could go for that. I find it a slightly clunky thing, so I'm just going to slack off all the strings again. These are a spare set of sacrificial strings I put on earlier. So let's get a screwdriver. So the idea, we'll want a large screwdriver cross thing. This will do actually for the adjustment. So I'm going to go up here, not very good visibility, and I'm going to undo the neck fixture. And the idea, I'm just thinking about this. What did I see people do? They undid it and then they pulled it up. How the hell do you do that? Really? It's not that easy. They sort of dropped it out somewhat. We'll see if we can. See what the minimum is required to do it and see how easily it comes out. So I'm taking all of the screws out a little bit. They actually are biting a lot into the wood of the heel by the feel of it, which is not ideal. Typically you'd prefer that they didn't. So now the idea is that we really that doesn't want to come apart, and that is because it is biting through the heel. So we don't have any choice on this one now. Okay, so that plan isn't going to work because there's no movement. These are not loose in the screw holes, which is a pity, Fender Mexico custom shop or whatever you're called. So that doesn't permit us to do it. If the screw holes were a little bit bigger, then you would have freedom to push them through and pull the neck out the other way. So unless, I hadn't really thought about that before, but this shows me that unless your holes through the wood of the heel are large enough to not be gripped by the thread. Of course you want the thread to grip into the heel. Sorry, I'm talking pocket. That's the heel. So the pocket holes need to be bigger than the outside of the thread diameter. Otherwise you can't adjust, you can't push the neck forward, and you can't expect these screws to move because they're bitten into the wood. So if we take a reading on here, and if so we're 418 on the diameter of this, so a 450 or a 5 would I'd say a 5 would be minimum to make it loose. Now of course we've now had to take that right off, so we're now in this position of having it moving free, but that's fine. Let's have a look for those who like to see these things. Let's have a quick look in the pocket. 10th of March 2010, blah blah blah, FP9, some other numbers. There we go. Stop going out of focus. Sorry, it's trying to catch the string. There we go. So that's their pocket. So these holes need to be bigger if you want to be able to push. I'm not even going to do them, but I'm just saying for Phil's point of view, if he wants them to push through so that they can, you can push up the neck and do the adjustments yourself in future, then you'll need to widen those screws. He'd probably say to me, Sam, I would expect you to have done what you thought was necessary. You could be right. I can do it at the last minute later, sooner or later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten up the truss rod a small amount. And again, that's one of the downsides of these vintage things, is how much do I adjust the truss rod? Oh look, the strings come off at the, I should have put the capo across. Anyway, how much do you make that adjustment? Well, your guess is as good as mine. There is no way. Right, I'm going to widen this now. It's just this is going to make every job concerning this neck harder than it needs to be. Am I going to do it? Am I going to do it? No, I'm going to leave it as it is for a minute. We'll think about it later, or ask about it later. Yeah. So yeah, the adjustment thing. That vintage style heel adjuster is only ever going to be guesswork, I'm afraid. Now what I'll do is, as I'm pushing in these, or screwing in these screws, I will not attach many of them, and I will allow myself to try and align the neck. So for doing that I'll need to put the high E string back in its thing, because I want to use that as a guideline. So we'll just want to see if we can position the neck a tiny bit better and allow it to have some a little bit more room on the fingerboard. So that's now going into the biting into the heel and also into the wood of the pocket. Let's put this one in. Stretch it out again. Sorry if you can't see this. So yeah, always a pain with heel mounted vintage truss rods. You just have to do that guesswork adjustment. So it only really helps if you have some experience to estimate it, but even if you have experience, no two necks are the same, so you've got no real guarantee that you're going to get the same adjustment. Oh, come on, these are both fallen off. Dang. Over you go. Pull you out, tighten you up. Should have probably put one of those things, capo, across there. Oh no, there's a fly has broken in. So I'm just tightening these up enough to follow the line. Okay, that's already a bit more better. It's a little bit better balanced. And I'm going to take that as a good start point and tighten these two up a bit more and see if we can keep it in that same position, and then we'll do the other two as long as it's in the right spot. No fly, no fly. No. Okay, so that's one and that's two done up-ish. That's still a tiny bit more biased on the base side, which we don't want. Now it may be that it doesn't want to let me make that much adjustment. Could be that it likes to naturally go that way. So what I sometimes do is use my shoulder to put a little bit of pressure on the neck while I do it up in the position I want it in, and it hurts the neck a little bit. And I'll do this on the other corner. Yeah, okay. That's about right. Go away. Right, that's right. So now I'll do these two up. So after I've done this, we'll say, okay, that's the action adjusted. That we'll retighten the strings up to pitch and see what effect that has on the relief. Now interestingly, the actual plate doesn't quite match the position of all these 4 screw holes. This last one, the 3 are in perfectly in the countersink. This last one is slightly off. It will kind of pull itself in, no doubt, but it's not spot on. But there you go. Right, get that fork of tunes. fly. Feels better already. That action is reduced. Well, the gap, the relief is reduced, and so the action alongside it. Okay. Now, did you hear that? That went right in the microphone. I've got the window open, so unless I can shoot this thing with a bit of fly spray, which I think I might just have to if it carries on annoying me thus. I'm getting new windows in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Come on. Go. So fast. A wall of poison. One more chance. Well, let's see where he goes. I'm happy if he goes out the window. Right, so, yeah, so here we go. Let's do the leveling. And fly will take off. So, like I say, 7.25 inch radius. Go away! Don't do this, man. Beat it, punk. Yeah, where was I? Oh. Yeah, 7.25 inch radius. Geometric limitations, man. Basically stop you getting the kind of action you could get on flatter radii necks. And it's an unsurpassable limitation. You can't beat the system, I'm afraid. There's no amount of fret leveling, and of course, you find that out the hard way when you're gung-ho trying to, in the early days, trying to level something out. I can do this. You can't. It has a kind of practical limitation you can't go beyond. But you get to learn where that is and how much that is. So, as I said, I can pretty much guarantee that a 1.5 down to 1.75 will work. Now, first, quick bit of leveling in the E track, and show you what we find. So straight away, I can tell you there's a big low spot in this neck. And the low spot, I don't know how well you can see this. So we have cutting, not, none, a little bit, cutting, low spot there, low spot there, cutting. So really the low spot is from here to here. Okay, so that's a big dip. So notes played down in there are going to choke out there. That's slightly separate also now from any high frets in the G track, which will, along with the tight radius, will be making it difficult to bend notes across. So we'll tackle that separately when we get to the G track. So the first, no, what did I just do? The first go at the high E track is a good diagnostic. It tells me there's this big low spot there. So my aim with this curved rod will be to gently tame the space either side of it, because basically this is what this neck is doing under the compression of 10 gauge strings at normal E tuning pitch. And there's nothing you can do about this neck. It's assuming this shape, and that's what it wants to do. So here we are. I am still not even touching those 3 now. So we've got this low spot right here, 3 frets that aren't even being touched, and there's nothing we can do about that other than to bring the other side, either side, down very slightly to kind of meet somewhere in the middle. Because the reason that makes any sense is because when you fret a note in a ditch like here, it makes the following frets relatively high, even if they're pretty standard by every comparison to everything else. So at this point I'm interested in how the individual notes play, and particularly these which I'm now fretting in the ditch. It's a tiny bit fizzy, as I would call it, but I know why. It's because we're fretting down in the ditch. So I'm going to just run over again with the file, and I'm just going to gently see if I can bring the frets down a tiny bit either side. Now as I'm doing this now, I'm freeing up the first of these, first and the third of these are now touching the thing, so that's cleared that up. So actually the 6th fret is the worst of the lot, but it's not disastrously worse. It's just, it is the bottom of a trench, and it's not surprising it's the middle of those 3, so it's a progressive little ditch, and that's what I love about this method. That's fine by me. So now we're going to use the same calibration of the rod, and we're going to move across to the B track. Now this one, I would probably expect to see the same group of low frets show up. Sometimes it changes, sometimes they aren't low. Sometimes it's only the fret ends that are low for some, or that side of the fretboard for some reason. But we tend to find that the pattern repeats. Sometimes it changes though by the time you reach the other side. So what I'm going to do is, bearing in mind the amount the effort I put into gently alleviating that effect of that ditch on the E track, I've sort of repeated that on the B track. So whether this kind of quality of Fender is worked on, the frets are worked on generally, I don't exactly know what techniques they use, but good. See the choking out there. That's now, as we come to the G track, is going to be the place where we're going to eke out or rescue those choked notes. Yeah, so whatever the technique they use, it's unlikely that they will use a technique that has this advantage, and the advantage of this is simply that I'm leveling this neck under tension of all the strings, and that tension has an effect on the frets in the sense that it bunches the neck, and it creates, or exaggerates probably, as well as sometimes creates, the hills and valleys that I've talked about. Hence we've got these low spots and higher spots and low spots, and it's a kind of, it means we're working with an undulating surface when it's under load. Now I'm not really even bothered whether it's has the same undulations not under load, because we don't play it not under load, we only play it with strings on and with the neck compressed. So now I'm concentrating on the whole of the neck in this G track, but I'm also going to start looking or thinking carefully about the levelness right up here, because that's where the notes tend to choke out on a tight radius low action guitar. Of course, if you raise the action, you can mask or hide or negate, obviate, whatever, disappear the effects of any uneven frets. Little frizzle there in the low spot, a little all the way up from there. So that's what will be causing the choke out. So I can, if I wanted to be finicky, I could draw the spot on the fret where we're getting this choke out, and it's right up here on the G, in the G track. Now, like I said before, I have to be realistic about what we can achieve with a 7.25 inch radius, and there's only so much I'm going to want to level to try and even out or eke out that note. And if I can't get it within, if I can't free it up within the amount of fret metal I'm comfortable taking, from experience again, then what I will do is I will compromise or admit defeat to some extent, and I'll go backwards and just reduce the action, raise the action very slightly, and that's what we have to do. But even in doing that, the amount we have to go back to make it play will still be less than it was when we started, because we've done this leveling. So the leveling does have some positive effect. Okay, so this is not wanting to, what's going on here? This is not, let's double check the action, this is not clearing up yet, so actually, according to that, that is a bit low. Let's just tweak this back up to where it should be. Don't know if that's moved in resetting the neck. Sometimes that happens. Right. So we want to be on 1.5 on this side here for this to play from expectations from the past. Let's just make sure we're on that. Otherwise there's no point pushing the challenge beyond what it can do. Tiny bit more. The amounts are so tiny though, that's the thing. And if you go up a tiny amount, you can clear it and suddenly it plays, and you've got no issues at all. So that's the correct height. Okay, so we're choking out right across here. That's just to the D side of the G track. So that's us going up and over the hill, as it were. But everything before the top of the hill is playing. Double check the action on here. Fraction low as well. Sometimes I kind of over and estimate it, and I start off too low because I'm being ambitious. And to be honest, it's got to be, if the high E is starting on 1.5, then the B has got to be on 1.5 and a tiny fraction more. So having it any lower is just, it's not playing the game. And the same with this, has to be a little bit over too. See how tiny the differences are that make this play or not play. Come along. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do a tiny bit more on the G track and then going to move and use the D track to clear up that last bit. But I think the thing you've got to keep in mind is that you really can't bend over the top of the hill. And the top of the hill is the midway point between the G and the D string, because if you do go over the top past that point, you're heading into the heading downhill on the other side, and that downhill is going to take away your clearance as the string comes down the other side of it effectively. So it just doesn't work. You just don't get it freed up to that point. Now we're going to calibrate for the D. Calibrate for the D, sunshine. Again, how you use this and how you know when it's calibrated just takes experience. I mean, practice is the word. And it's not like rocket science. It doesn't take a PhD. You have to have used it a lot, and you'll get the feel of it. So I'm moving that out of the way, and here we go for the D track. Now, as we come down the thicker wound strings side of the neck, what we find is that those strings vibrate, spin more, rotate and spin more when struck or plucked or whatever you want to call it, hit, and as a result there's obviously we're making sure that we don't have any high frets or low frets, but also the bumpiness of the neck, that sort of waviness that I talked about, can also come into effect here, because if there are a series of ups and downs, as well as the individual ones that we might level off, but if there's generally a series of peaks and valleys, these strings, when spinning, tend to clip the tops of them. Yeah, I don't think we can go past the top of the hill. Okay, I'm going to do the A track. Yeah, so when I get to this side of the neck, I tend to think of, what am I doing? I tend to think of the the string spinning the whole length of the neck and what it comes into contact with, and are we getting what I call fret slap? And I only call it fret slap to differentiate it from fret buzz, which is single. We could call it single fret buzz or multiple hills and valleys fret buzz. You know what I mean? That's all I mean by the two, and I just use a different name for my own purposes to define them. This one doesn't want to sit on that side, but it will now. So at this side of the neck, I'm thinking about the hills and valleys buzz, and I'm thinking about the overall shape of this file. Now I want it to impress itself on however many peaks it comes across. I want it to gently take off the extreme tops of all of those hills that I come across or that it encounters, and to do that I need to not really think about pressing too hard. I need to just use repetition to do that, and it seems to work really well. This is one occasion where dust from the fret leveling would probably look quite good in the relic finish. One little squelchy note up there on the 15th, sorry. So I'm just going to concentrate, and by concentrate on that area, all I mean really is I'm just going to press down a little bit more at this end to just flatten that little bumpy topography off a little bit. There we go. That's probably all it needs. Fine. Just perfect. And finally, calibrate now for the low E track. Very good. Okay. And here we go. Again, thinking of just letting mostly gravity and the weight of the bar and the shape of the bar, importantly, that smooth curve, let it work its way onto the, more or less onto the top of this slightly, gently rolling, undulating fretboard. Now what you find is that in this method of leveling, by the time you finish, you tend by definition to have leveled more, slightly more on the bass side than the treble side. That's usually the way, and that's all it's really showing is that the amount of spin that these strings make is greater on the bass side, so you need to do that more, a little bit more on that side. So I'm going to do a little bit more there because you can hear there's still some rattle. Again, at a low playing action, that's not surprising on a 7.25, but we'll try and alleviate as much as I can. One of the things I did seem to find out the other day was that in the case of a particular guitar I was adjusting, the height of the pickup poles and how close they were to the strings seemed to pull the strings down onto the frets and cause quite a bit of additional fret slap, which I thought was really intriguing because I'd never noticed that effect before. And when I slackened off or dropped the pickups away, the amount of fret slap went away. I think we may have to concede or compromise here. A lot of that's to do with technique as well. There's a whiff of that still on the D. Let's just look where we are. That's because I think we are we low on the D? 1.6. Depends which bloody side of this. None of these are very reliable. I've got loads of them and they all tell lies. Depends which one you use. I think what you have to do is stay with one side of the scale if you're going to use it at all. This one is saying just over 150, went towards the 175, and that is about the right place actually. But what I'm concerned about was the D, wasn't it? The D. Yeah, the D is fractionally low. And So difficult, so fine-tuned. Right. We're getting tone bends on this radius. That's as much as you can hope for, I think, on a 7.25. Okay, so I'm good with that. While we've got it under load with old strings, I'm going to just, let's have a look at the position of these tremolo screws. They seem to me a little bit far down, so I'm going to back them all off a quarter of a, what's it, quarter of a turn, I think, or less. Let's see if we get a bit more return to tune. Yeah, that's proved. That's a tiny little adjustment. If your 6-point tremolo screws along here are touching, if the heads of the screws are touching the base, okay, then you're running the risk of them not returning to pitch. Sorry, let's do this. So, give you an example where, so you probably know that your tremolo sits like this, front of your tremolo, and you have a screw that comes down through this like this and goes into the body, right? And you've got 6 of them in a line, and they've got a flat top like that. And what you really want is your tremolo to start by default, unless you've got it floating, but if you're in a down only like this one is, you want the tremolo to sit comfortably right there, and you want it to return to there. And as you know, it pivots, tremolo pivots on the front edge of all of these screws against the side, the front edge of the screw hole. So that's your pivot point, and you want that to sort of rock and tilt back down into this position. If you have, or for that to happen, let's put it this way, you need a tiny gap here, believe it or not, because the danger is, if you don't have that tiny gap, he said, taking a, he said, oh look, it's a thumbnail. If you don't have that tiny gap, there's some light, thank you, end of thumbnail. If you don't have that tiny gap, right, what's going to happen is this, you don't know you've got a gap because you've tightened it up and it goes like so, and you think you aren't putting any pressure on it, right? You think you've just got it touching, but you don't really know. And what can very easily happen is that if you've got it just touching, even the tiniest amount just touching, what happens is, terrible drawing, I can't draw it without wibbly line. What you're in danger of getting is, to a tiny amount, your tremolo lifting up like that, and then sometimes if it'll sit back down and stop there, or if you push it, you can force it past that point there and it will sit flat, and it has this sort of up and down instability at that end. So I've not explained that bit very well, but the point being is, if you want to make sure that you're not constraining this end of the tremolo at all, to allow it to comfortably plonk back down, lift that up so that you end up with that little tiny bit. And the truth is, it doesn't matter if that's 0.5 millimeter, that clear space. You'll see it, and you want that clear space. It'll work. If you go too high, it creates some problems, but you know, within a sort of fraction of a millimeter, See what I've done there? I've gone from dead flat to just a bit up, and that suddenly stabilized that tremolo. So I got them all roughly at that sort of level. Sorry about the lighting. It's a British summer, so it's gone all dark. Anyway, so look, I've done the leveling to as good as we're going to get out of a 7.25 radius neck. It's freed up the notes that weren't playing before. They were completely choked off before, and not only on the E string, but they were choked off on the B as well. So now they're not. What I'm going to do is remove the strings. We've tweaked that. I'm going to remove the strings, and now we're going to recrown the frets, and then once we've done that, we're going to polish them out. And to do that, I'm going to, oh no, it's a Mexican. I'm going to risk putting masking tape on here, and the reason I'm going to risk it is because looking at this, the finish is not that kind that's going to flake off. How do I know? Well, I just sort of know it isn't, and I'll eat my hat if it does. And of course, if it does, then it'll be even more convincingly relic'd, right? But it won't. You can see on the Americans, or whichever particular American Strats with maple finish, you can see, and I think that's because they're poly, and I think this is, for starters, this is nitro anyway, so it's not gonna, it's got a better adhesion than the poly. The poly, whatever they did in the factory and why ever it ended up this way, it always seemed to be floating on the surface of the wood. This doesn't seem that way at all, but I will, as always, confess the errors of my ways. But we have to be able to mask off in order to polish out the frets. Okay, so I'm going to remark them with this stuff, whatever it's called, Sharpie. What isn't Sharpie? It's a Nobo marker, and we're going to recrown, and then we're going to mask off and sand and polish out. And I'll do that off camera, since it's boring, and I've shown it in a million other videos, and it's the same process every time. Now here I'm being very careful because being this has got solvent in it, what I don't want to do is swipe my way across a board that I suspect is very likely a nitro finish, because it would start mixing with the, or start softening isn't the right word, you know, yeah, softening the nitro straight away. So you've got to be very careful with your pen. It's mightier than the sword. Okay, so I'm going to come down here, zoom in a bit, some close up now, you know, ish, close up ish excitement. Okay, so I'm going to use the medium side of this trusty old StewMac fret crowning file. I'm just going to support the headstock with one bench dog, and then I'm going to do the recrowning. Now, like I sort of won't be surprised to know that I'm going to expect to do a bit more work on the bass side of the fret, as always, because that's where I did the most leveling to alleviate any fret slap. And on some of them it was equal all the way across. Oh, the thing I forgot to do, I'll do it on when we fit the new strings, I forgot to do the nut slots. It's not, the pinging wasn't bad, so it's going to be very minor. I'll just run the file through them just to widen them. The files I use will give the slots a slightly V-shaped profile, cross section, shall I say, and that helps to prevent the strings sticking as well, because instead of sitting down deeply down in a slot, they're at the bottom of a slight V shape. It changes the appearance very slightly, and you know, I guess some people find that hard to accept, but now these two frets here didn't need much crowning at all, so they were the lower ones in this whole sequence. So to be fair, I'm not really doing that much recrowning, so sometimes when a fretboard has already been quite heavily leveled, either in a previous workshop or in the factory context, you can start doing some, I can start doing some leveling, and what seems like huge flat spots very quickly appear, and it can be quite, and if you're doing it and you're new to this technique, you could be quite surprised and think you've taken a ton of metal, when in fact you haven't. You're starting with effectively flat spots created by the factory or previous technician. So it's good to start with a sense of how flat the frets are or aren't to begin with, how much they've been worked or haven't been worked to begin with. So these are not taking that long at all, so that's good. So I think, you know, am I surprised? Am I surprised that this, if you like, premium Fender required fretwork to have a lower action? No, not at all. I mean, it was fun to play as it was. I'm aimed to free up some bends that were still there at the action that was fun to play at. And of course, if I'd been playing something with a band and I had to bend a note to get a solo or something, then I would absolutely not accept, or it wouldn't be acceptable that I couldn't bend that note. So I'd have to make it play better, even at the action it was set at. So, so was I surprised that it had uneven frets preventing that happening? No, not really. All guitars have that. Am I surprised that even the ones that are supposed to have had fretwork done? No, because not many people, very few people, use a technique like this where the frets are leveled with the bunching effects of compression at play. Because if you level the frets with the neck nicely flattened out on the bench, you're leveling it without those compression effects. And if it's true that those compression effects, or the compression creates a bunching, that's the effect of the compression, then that's going to throw off your frets that you leveled if you did it when the neck was nicely relaxed and flat on the table. So, like I say, not many techniques other than this one level the frets in the playing position. With, you know, and that means it's not the curvature of the fingerboard isn't the important thing here. It's the compression of the neck wood is the important part. So what I'm going to do now, even though I'm going to do it again later, I'm just going to use this stuff, naphtha, to get rid of as much of the pen as possible before I mask off the neck. Now naphtha is inert on nitro and poly, so you can be safe using it to clean up your neck in this case. There are some very old paints used on, I've found in the past, the hard way, used on guitar knobs, vintage guitar knobs sometimes, and other things that you really don't expect that naphtha can still interfere with, but it's very difficult to predict. So if you're working with a really vintage guitar that's well outside of the sort of familiar Japanese, or sorry, familiar Chinese, modern Far East Chinese manufacturing techniques, then don't assume that naphtha will be good for the weird and wonderful paints that you encounter, because it may not. I'm just going to have a quick brush under here. I think a bit of brushing is all this needs. I don't really think I'm going to take it apart and clean up the plate even. I don't want it to look new, and I don't want it to look especially tidy or anything. Okay, so I'm going to go off camera, put on something to watch, and I'm going to mask this off, do all the sanding, and come back to you when it's time to put the new strings on. So not a long-winded setup here today, just one trying to make the very best out of these frets on this fantastic sounding Fender Roadworn. So see you in a minute. Back after the frets reground and polished out, reground, sanded, excuse me, and polished out. So what I'm going to do now is going to fit the new strings, and then we'll tweak a bit of tweaking on the what do we call it? We call it a bit of tweaking on the, oh, how does this work? Is this 1s and 3s now? No, 1, 2 and 3. Okay, 1, 2 and 3. Yes, so we'll tweak the nut slots in a minute. We've loaded up the strings. We'll be in for an early-ish finish this evening. This is all I had to do on the book's cards. I got some plotting to do at home. I've got quite a bit of working out specs for Andrew's left-handed Indonesian guitars, which are hanging upstairs in my spare room waiting for a spec, so I can put together an invoice for all the parts and the costs of assembly, and then get into ordering the bits and stuff. And then after that I've got in the office here, workshop here, which is an old office. In the workshop here I've got two left-handed Chinese left-handed Firebird type things, which also need kitting out with stuff. Anyway, so here we are. Let's get our, so we need our cutters and whatnot. So when I string these up, I go 2 past the intended post and stick it in like so, bend it over and wind on. Nice. 2 past the post it's going to. Sometimes if you get this wrong, you pick the wrong string, you can make a mess. Cost yourself a whole pack of strings sometimes. How do I know? Because I've done it. And I can do it when I think I'm awake. Target 2 past. But I'm being conscious so I don't cost myself another packet of strings. Up to that one, 2 past, cut. Tell you what I've been enjoying watching on YouTube recently, a random recommendation, funny content is, what's he call himself? Criminal Lawyer Reacts, CLR, but his name is Bruce Rivers, and he's an American defense attorney, but he also runs or his son, I think, encouraged him to put together a YouTube channel where he comments on any number of those sort of interrogations or American police arrest videos, whatever type of things. There's tons of that content in the US, and but he sits in his plush office in his lawyer's suit and makes comments and supplies some good information too for anyone needing a defense lawyer. So some very sort of good general insights into US law, but funny, I mean hilarious, and he's irreverent, so he swears a lot on the YouTube channel, which I kind of like the way he does it. He carries it off well. Even some people don't like cussing, but I think he does it. It's funny when he does it. So, and I guess it doesn't have a negative impact on his legal career, because he seems, if you believe him, seems to be doing well. Anyway, so look for Bruce Rivers, Criminal Lawyer React, and his specialism is what he calls self-snitching. From the point of view of, if you're in trouble with the cops, don't self-snitch. And that doesn't mean he supports all naughty criminals who do bad things, but he has a principle of, if you're in trouble, you should say nothing, and you should take advice from your lawyer and not talk your mouth off and incriminate yourself. That's the main kind of point. And so in his jargon, self-snitching is where so many suspects find themselves in police custody and talk their way into a confession or jail because they can't keep quiet. And it's quite funny when you see people doing that, because they seem unable to keep their mouths shut. So he calls it self-snitching, which of course is a very American thing, but it's funny to watch. Anyway, he Bruce Rivers, CLR, criminal lawyer, reacts. Okay, so I'm looking to just bring these uneven, what do you call them, down. These, the nuts. Yeah, I'm looking to bring the first fret action down to a nice low action, and I have to cut downwards into the slot to do that, which also has the effect of widening as well, which is good, but it's still higher than I would like, and higher, I know, than Phil would ultimately like. So I'm trying to do it in such a way that there's the correct backwards slope, and also reach the correct first fret action as well. It's quite hard to do when you've got a you're constrained by the backward angle there. Still quite high. So sometimes there are times when I'm not a fan of these files. They somehow seem to let me down a bit, or they cut, and then they cut too far in one go. It's fine. I just want it just coming to the edge of touching that. That's it. Yes, so Bruce Rivers, funny. If you like that sort of stuff, well, that's a big difference. Okay, sorry, I've just lost, you didn't see any of that because I just pulled the camera away. Right, now we're going to do the same with the B track. So what I'll do first is I'm going to use the file predominantly to widen the slot so it's a notch rather than just a tall walled slot. Now we'll just lift it over, drop it back in, and that's probably 0.6 of a mil there, and that's enough to play sharp. So that's one of the things that has an impact on what we think of as tuning, but in fact is, I suppose, an intonation issue. So it's good to get this sorted out, get it low, the correct height at the first fret, which only has to be technically about 1/10 of a mil, which is quite surprising. But if you think of how a capo works, the combination of the capo and your standard bridge height action on a typical electric guitar ends up meaning that your default first fret action when you use a capo is about 1/10 of a mil. And as you know, you don't ever really struggle to play that. You don't go, oh my god, this first fret action is impossibly low, I must raise it, I can't play it like this. You tend to actually enjoy how light and easy it is. Okay, that's a tiny bit more. So, you know, if you ever think that you 0.03 of a mil is too low, just like I say, just compare it to the actual first, inverted commas, first fret action on a capo. And by first fret I mean the fret after the capo, obviously, because the capo takes over the role of the first fret, as we know. So here I'm also clearing the high E slot, which is currently a bit grippy and also sets too high an action over the first fret. So the amount of difference that getting the correct first fret action makes is substantial. It takes the, it doesn't have a visual, so much of a visual thing that it does when you have a lower action down here. It looks great, or you can see it much quicker, but the thing you'll notice with a low first fret action is your notes played down here at the nut, near the nut, won't go, or in the first fret particularly, won't go sharp. They'll play in tune true, but you'll also notice that all the chords you play down here are so much easier to form, and your hand is not as tired as before. And it's a very powerful but subtle thing, but you can really notice it. Of course, the feeling is just it's effortless to play chords. Now some people will not like that, and they will find it doesn't feel like guitars should. Some people like a very tall action, and that's fine too, but my customers, and particularly my repeat customers, are after a low first fret action and a low last fret action. So I'm making small adjustments. There we go, perfect. So off with the other strings. And this one, it looks pretty low already actually. It's just about right, but a tiny bit high. Very minor. So what I'll do is I'll just first of all widen it up so we get rid of any of the pings, and then we'll just lower the front edge microscopically. That's about right actually. Won't go any further with that. This one a bit more, so we'll go to the blue, the wider one, and then we'll just widen the whole thing out first, and not much different. They're not far apart. I'm sort of wimping out of it here. I'm always tend to do that. What are we doing? We're doing the 36 one. Going to do a tiny bit more on this one. Again, clear it so it doesn't catch. So widen it a bit first, and then lower it a bit. Just want it to go backwards, keep that angle going backwards. So just looking here, I've got quite height still. I'm doing that thing of wimping out a bit. Let me just go back. I'm chickening out. Better to be safe than sorry, that's true. So I can still see a big gap under there, so I am playing it very cautiously. blue. Okie dokie. And the orange. Oh yeah, tuned. Right, hold on, sorry you've lost the picture a minute. Okay, right, so a couple of things to do. Let's get this final bits done. We're going to stretch out the strings, and that is critical to keeping this staying and playing in tune. So thumb and forefinger treatment to stretch it all out, like so. And then what we'll do after that is we'll intonate it, and then we'll set the tremolo to its, but it's probably already there by the feel of it, but we'll tweak it, make sure it's at its perfect point, the lightest it can be without the plate lifting up when you bend strings, which you also don't want. So stretching is quite a firm thing, but take care not to break strings as well. It's light as a feather compared to what it was before, so it's a good change in playability for sure. The combination of the lower action at the other end, the leveled frets, and the first fret action, everything suddenly, and the flatter relief, by the way, the flatter relief as well, that's important to bear in mind. So we flatten that out, and the flatter relief in many ways is possible because of the leveled frets as well, so they make it possible to have a flatter action and avoid getting buzzes. Okay, let's get a cable, check the intonation and adjust it if necessary. Yeah, the vintage style truss rod adjuster down at the heel is just not a good idea. It's what they did, and it's, you know, people like it because it's it's traditional, but it makes life a bit more difficult. But if you get it sorted, you rarely have to move it. You might have to change it later in the year. It's pretty good actually. I could do, G can go back a tiny bit. Fraction. I expect we're going to find that the D is slightly sharp now. That ain't bad. Actually, that's pretty spot on. Okay, now let's check the tremolo and see if we can get it set to its lightest point. I expect it's already there. Yeah. Yeah. So that's acceptable. But it is really as light as you can go. There we are. That's it. Fender Roadworn Strat done, ready to go home. Let's take that out. Delicious. If you were in the mood when you've taken the first frets down, first fret action down, what you can do, if you're in the mood, is you can take off any of this excess material on the nut. There's no real need for that to be there, so you could hand file that down. I'm going to leave it as it is, but it's not that high. But on other guitars, sometimes I will file that down just to get rid of the excess material. It isn't necessary. But there we have it. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.